Hi, my name is Bill Hamilton, and this is a story that got cut from my new book, Would You Do What They Did? Great Christian Leaders from Our Past. Dawn on Lake Tiberias, written and narrated by William Dean Hamilton. Cy walked down from his house onto the beach by the Lake Tiberias. Shadows that Cy knew were mountains hid behind streams of mist on the far shore. Cy sweated from the heat of a hot day near the end of summer, so he hesitated for a moment behind the shade of a grove of palm trees. He knew he was lucky to be able to do most of his work at night when the air would be cooler. The air smelled like only large bodies of water could, unbelievable freshness mixed with that old fish stench. Cy's partner Andy was wearing his brown work uniform, a dull-looking robe-like thing, and he wore his dark brown hair short, except around his ears. He was working on the drag nets, huge nets that needed repairs a lot because they got caught on the rocks in the bottom of the lake. Cy said, "Andy, how's it going? Are the nets okay?" Andy looked up. "Oh, hi, Cy. I think they're fine. I just wanted to have a final look since we have a few minutes." Cy said, "Good. I have a feeling we're going to have a great day today. The weather is perfect for fishing." Andy said, "I think you're right." Cy looked at their boat, a 30-foot long wooden craft that looked like a large rowboat with a sail in the middle. It was moored along a pier that was 50 feet long. On the other side of the pier was another boat of about the same description that belonged to their partners. "Help me get these back into the boat," Andy said, and pointed to the nets. They pulled them into the boat. A voice called out behind them, "Hey, you two, you're going to make us look bad getting to work so early." Cy turned around to see the two brothers, John and Jim, who were in charge of the other boat. They were large men who wore brown work uniforms like they all did, but John always had a wild glint in his eye, and his hair wasn't kept as neatly as the rest. Cy said, "Hi, guys. Once the sun is set, we're going to be ready. How about you?" John spread his hands and made a gesture to indicate his might. "Don't be worrying about us. It's the help that seems scarce." Cy looked around. There wasn't a sign of the 4 hired men they needed to help with the boats, and he only saw the 2 rows of small clay houses that were in the village. He hoped the men wouldn't be late. This was the sort of night that you could catch a lot of fish, and you had to make money when you could. But he saw all of them coming together. He hoped this didn't mean that they had been in a tavern together. He needed every man on his best wits. He said, "Here they come now." John said, "Good. Me and Jim can't be doing all the work, can we?" Cy looked at the men. None of them looked drunk, which was a good thing. They all wore similar gray work robes and had beards of different lengths. They were laughing at a joke that he couldn't hear, all of them smiling. Good, he thought, they will be in a good mood for tonight. That will make the work easier, maybe even enjoyable. 2 of the men, Tim and Jake, broke off from the other 2 and headed towards Cy. The other 2 went with John and Jim to their boat. Tim said, "Hi, boss, I think the weather's good for tonight." Cy said, "Yes, I do think you're right," and the 3 walked along the dock to the boat and to Andy, who was inside with the nets. Cy could smell the fish much more here. It smelled like money to him. He asked, "Are we ready to go, Andy?" Andy looked up. "Yes, we are. I'm all set and the boat looks fine." Cy said, "By the time we get it set up, it will be dark, I think." He undid the rope from the pier and the boat swayed under his feet. But he had done this so often he didn't even notice anymore. He picked up an oar and pushed at the dock, forcing the boat backwards. He looked to the west and saw the light had begun to redden. The mist still covered the distant peaks. The waves made soft switching noises as they crashed into the boat and tipped it back and forth. Seagulls glided on currents of air, and the other boats crept up over the light blue sea. This was Cy's favorite part of the day. It was why he had put the boat out a little early. But the whole idea of fishing at night was so that the fish couldn't see the nets and wouldn't get caught up in them. It would take a while to meet up with the other boat, and it wouldn't be quite dark enough when they had. Andy never complained about setting off early. Cy thought it was because he felt the same way. They rowed out, but John's boat was still moored at the dock about 1,000 feet away. A fish jumped out of the water a few feet from the boat, and Cy smiled. That fish will be in my net soon, he thought. He saw John throw off the rope and push his boat out into the water. It will only be a few moments now. Other fishermen, the type who threw small nets rather than using drag nets, were rowing back to the shore. Cy's crew had tried it and had the equipment on their boats, but the dragnet was the best way to make a good catch. But it was kind of fun to do sometimes, and the dragnet was very hard work. The red in the sky darkened, and the heat of the day seemed to lessen. Unless it's my imagination, Cy thought. John yelled, "Daydreaming again, Si?" Si jumped a little and said, "John, there you are, finally." John said, "Good throw," which is unusual for you. John smiled and turned to his crew. "Okay, boys, let's pull back." The boat separated and the net flopped out into the water. Si was helping the net out to prevent snags until all 800 feet drifted out into the water. Si tied his end to the boat. While they were getting ready, Andy had lit a signal fire. Si signaled once by opening the door on the side of the fire to show that he was ready. John signaled twice, the signal that he wasn't. He would want to wait until it was darker. Dark blue had overtaken half the sky, but John wouldn't want to start until all the light blue was gone. One by one the stars came out, and when their display was complete, John signaled once. The dragging was to begin. Si said, "Okay, guys, it's time to start rowing." Then he picked up his own oar, and they started to row to shore. To start each stroke, Si said, "Stroke!" The boat moved slowly to shore. With each stroke they could feel the drag of the immense net. But something felt wrong. As they got closer to shore, usually the drag would get worse as fish were caught in the net. No time to think about it now, Si thought. They had to keep the boat going or the fish they had caught in the net would escape. They were much closer to shore now, and Si shouted, "Turn!" The crew only oared on the side that was away from the boat, and the boat turned towards the other one. It was too dark to tell if John's boat was doing the same, but Si was sure it was. After a few moments, Si shouted, "Halt!" and the crew stopped rowing. The boats came together with a thud. Si thought, not exactly textbook, but it was okay. The crews of both boats pulled on the nets as quickly as they could to prevent the fish from escaping, but as they pulled, they saw no fish. John screamed, "What? No fish? And you guys kept up with us for once. I don't understand it." Si said, "It should have been a huge catch. I don't understand it either." John said, "I could tell that there were less fish in there than usual because of the drag, but I never imagined no fish." Si said, "All right, we've got a lot of night left. Let's go to another place on the lake and start again. The question is where?" John said, "Well, that's the part I hate the most. I think it makes the most sense to go to the other side of the lake, but that will take a long time and we'll miss one pass, if not two." Si said, "Yeah, but maybe we can drag on our way over there. It will be a challenge to keep the pace up." John said, "Yeah, but we should try and reel the nets in around the middle of the lake. Maybe we'll get lucky and catch some fish that avoided our first net." Si said, "Might as well. It's a plan then." The pair told the other fishermen what they had decided, and they set off. Morning. The dawn would have been magnificent if Si had looked, but his arms felt tired and his hopes ground to dust. The 8-man crew had toiled like slaves in the hot night and not captured one fish. Si said, "All right, men, we'll go back now. I know you're tired and we haven't caught anything, so every 50 feet or so stop and take a rest, and if I see any fish, Andy and I will throw the net out." And they rowed, and Si looked, rowed, looked. Si was beginning to think that this lake, big enough to be known as a sea, didn't have any fish left in it. But then, when they were only about 100 feet from shore, a fish glimmered under the waves. Si and Andy threw the net, and the fish was caught in it. They pulled at the net and were too excited over one little fish, but that didn't change how they felt. The fish thrashed, but was no real challenge for professional fishermen to haul into the boat. It was about a third of the size of the usual fish they caught. They lifted the part of the net that held the fish out of the water, and the fish slid through the holes in the net. For a second, Si felt like the raw wire that was his nerves had frayed through. But then he felt a weight on him, and from the side of his eye he thought he saw something more wonderful than an angel. He turned, and a man stood watching him from the shore. Not an angel at all. Si asked, "Andy, is that the man that stayed at our house and helped Mom out?" Andy asked, "What man?" Si pointed, "That man over there." Andy said, "Well, he looks familiar, but when did he stay at our house?" Si said, "You know, the guy that John told us about." Andy was puzzled. "Who does John know that we don't? We work with him every day." Si said, "No, not that John. The one that's in prison. Andy said, yeah, that was a bad deal. He never deserved that. So I said, well, I guess so, but it doesn't matter. Let's just get back to shore and wash and fix the nets and hope for a better tomorrow. Andy said, we'll get him tomorrow. Hey, look, some people have come over to hear your friend. If I wasn't so tired, I would listen to him. So I said, yeah, I think I would too, especially because of how he helped Mom. They had only to row a few hundred feet more to arrive at the dock. Once they did, they unloaded the nets. Cy laid the nets out on the beach. Lilies and reeds had been caught in the nets, and a few holes had been ripped in the night's work. Andy worked on patching the nets, and Cy cleaned them. Down farther on the beach, Zeb, John, and Jim's father was yelling at them. They were a long way down the beach, so we could only hear the words fish, money, and idiot. A crowd was forming around Cy's friend, and while that happened, Cy finished washing the nets and started to help Andy repair them with the other two men. They were almost done when the man came to Cy and he said, Simon, my rock, would you let me use your boat to teach the crowd? Cy said, of course, teacher. He didn't feel like it, but he knew he should. Cy and Andy took him on the boat a few feet from shore so that he could teach without the crowd pressing on him. Cy rested his eyes and sat on the boat. After about a half an hour, Cy found himself being awakened by Andy, who whispered to him, you really should be hearing this. This is a great teacher and master. Cy said, I would, Andy, but I am so tired and hopeless from the night. I was sure that this would be a good night for me. That makes me wonder if I'm living the life I was meant to. Andy said, oh, don't be like that. It'll be just fine. A shadow fell on them as they talked, and they turned to look. It was the teacher. He said, put out into the deep of the lake. Cy said, oh, all right. And so Andy and Cy rowed to the middle of the lake. The muscles in their arms and back ached. The sun made the morning sticky and humid. Cy saw that Zeb had the crew out casting nets to make up for the bad night's work. The teacher said, Simon, my rock, let down your nets. Cy said, Master, we worked all night and it took nothing. Cy looked at him and bowed his eyes down in shame. But at your word, I will let down the nets. Cy grumbled to himself as he hastily threw the drag nets overboard. What does a carpenter turned rabbi know about fishing? Then it felt like something hit the boat, and Cy fell down. He caught himself before his head hit the side of the boat. Then he looked up and saw that the net was being pulled into the water. It was making the boat almost capsize. Cy yelled, John, get over here! Cy thought it must be a huge fish to do this, but there weren't any whales in the lake. Andy had been momentarily stunned as well, but the two grabbed a hold of the net and stopped more of it from going overboard. They pulled, and fish flopped into the floor of the boat. They strained, and the fish were now up to their knees. The other boat arrived, and John, Jim, and the other men pulled fish into their boat as well. There were so many fish, Cy's boat started sinking. Cy and Andy threw fish overboard. John's boat started to sink as well, and Zeb yelled at them from the shore, Don't you dare throw any fish overboard! But they did anyway. When they had recovered the nets and threw enough fish overboard so that it wouldn't sink, Cy threw himself to his knees and pointed at Jesus and said, Jesus, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. And Jesus gently put Cy's finger down and put his hand on his shoulders and said, Fear not, for now you will catch men. So they rowed slowly with the overloaded boat to shore. Cy said, Everyone listen. We are now going to be following Jesus. Help yourselves to our fish. The crowd pushed them, young and old and in between, and they grabbed the fish. They seemed to forget that they were gathered to hear the words of Jesus, and they carried the fishes back to their houses or to the market to sell them. When the crowd dispersed, Cy saw John and Jim mending their nets while their father was sorting the fish, and the two helpers salted the fish on the boats to prepare them for market. Jesus walked over to John and Jim. Zeb said, Hey, Jesus, you can come and work for me. You know, being a prophet doesn't pay very well. John said, I'm sorry about my father. He doesn't mean any disrespect. Jesus said, Sons of Zebedee, John and James, come follow me and become fishers of men. Jim stood and looked at John. John nodded. Jim said, We'll come with you. And they walked away. leaving Zeb and the other 2 crew members in the boat. Zeb said, "You can't take my boys. Well, take care of me." Jesus said, "Your Father in heaven." Zeb thought for a moment. "Take care of my boys, Jesus." Jesus nodded, and they walked away. Notes: Lake Tiberias is also known as the Sea of Galilee. I have tried to fill the gaps on the Gospel accounts while being as true to the original narratives as possible. You have noticed that I've tried to trick the reader by using unfamiliar versions of the names. I think it creates a bigger impact. I'm sorry if you disagree. The John that was in prison was John the Baptist. The Gospels record that they dragged their nets that night and also threw them into the water. So I've tried to reconcile the 2 versions with
Hi, my name is Bill Hamilton, and I have written a collection of biographies of famous Christians called Would You Do What They Did? Great Christian Leaders from Our Past. The book is about Martin Luther, Francis of Assisi, John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, Thomas Becket, the famous martyr, and I've written them in creative nonfiction style, which is where you take nonfiction events and add details so that the story comes to life. I want you to be able to have the feeling that you're taming a wolf with Francis of Assisi, fleeing from the wrath of the king with Thomas Becket, fearing for your own life on what you think is a sinking ship with John Wesley, and fearing for your own salvation with Martin Luther. They didn't live in a world of old dusty books filled with facts. They lived in a world full of color and emotion. So please check out my book. If you want any more information, check out my website, williamdeanhamilton.net. Thank you very much. God bless.